Alrighty, welcome to the Tuesday, November 24th, 2020 regular business meeting of our EBMUD Board of Directors. Due to COVID-19 and in accordance with the latest Alameda County Health Order and the Governor's Executive Order N2920, which suspends portions of the Brown Act, this meeting will be conducted remotely. In compliance with these orders, a physical location has not been provided for the meeting. These measures will only apply during the period in which state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing. This morning, the Finance and Administration Committee met and the board attended the System Capacity Charge Update Workshop. And finally, there was a DERWA meeting on November 23rd. The meetings will be reported out under item 11. All directors, including myself, are participating via Zoom. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director Lenny.
Here.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson.
Here.
President Young.
I am here. Okay, will everybody please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have no announcements from closed session, so we will move on now to public comment. If members of the public wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. For comments on non-agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation, if applicable, and the topic you'll be addressing. The secretary will call each speaker in the order they are received, and each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will keep track of time and inform each speaker when their allotted time has concluded. And I understand we have currently have one hand raised for public comment.
Yes, we have Justin Young. And Justin, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself, and your time, 3 minutes, will start now.
So this is for consent calendar item number 7. So I say that now?
You want to speak?
Do you want to wait until, do you want to speak under that item?
Yeah, just because what you mentioned,
Okay.
President Young, you said that, so I think I'll wait.
Okay. Very good. Is there anyone else for public comment
We have no
on
other,
an item that is not on the agenda?
we have no one else for public comment.
Okey doke. Then we will move on to, we don't have any special items. That moves us on to the consent calendar, and we have 9 items for consideration. We will be pulling item 7.
Move the remainder.
Second.
Okay, motion to move items 1 through 6 plus 8 and 9, and has been moved by Director McIntosh and seconded by Director Coleman. Roll call vote, please.
Directors Coleman.
Present. Yes. Sorry.
Katz.
Yes.
Lenny.
Yes.
McIntosh.
Yes.
Mellon.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
President Young.
Yes. Okay, Clifford, I believe we have a presentation queued up for item 7. And Justin, we'll have you speak following the presentation if that's acceptable.
That's fine. Jimmy Oloye, Director of Engineering and Construction, will make the presentation.
Jimmy wants to drive
Okay.
Janetta. Okay.
So, let's see, do I have control? Okay. All right.
You have control now, Jimmy.
Okay. Just checking.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, President Young and members of the board. I'm here to give you a brief presentation on the design agreement amendment for the chemical safety system improvements at our water treatment plants. Here's a brief agenda of what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to give you a brief background on the project and then talk a little bit about the project timeline and the additional scope elements and costs that result in this amendment. But I really wanted to spend probably the majority of the time talking about our design process for large and complex projects. And then I'll summarize and give some next steps. So a little bit about the background of this project. Back in 2015, the district had a close call with one of our chemical systems. An ammonia tank at the San Pablo water treatment plant imploded due to poor safety controls on the chemical system. Luckily for this incident, nobody was injured and there was no release of chemicals into the environment. However, this incident made us consider what other issues we might have at our facilities. So in response, we hired a consultant expert in chemical systems to perform an audit of all of our chemical systems at our water treatment plants. And this was done in late 2017. Our water treatment facilities have been built over many decades, and many codes and standards have changed over that time period. We found that our facilities were inconsistent in their chemical safety practices, and we noticed some deficiencies that needed to be resolved. So after the audit was completed, there was a sense of urgency to address the issues, and we moved quickly to hire a consultant to perform the design of the chemical safety system improvements, and this was in December of 2017. So the original scope for the chemical safety system improvements built upon the recommendations in the chemical safety system audit. That was a high level, they were high level recommendations of the deficiencies, and it included a high level construction cost estimate, and based on that, we estimated the design cost for the project at about $4.4 million. And that was the initial contract that we provided, that we issued to the consultant. During the course of the project, in the initial stages, we had some additional planning work that needed to be performed and alternatives analyses that resulted in a basis of design report that identified a number of other issues that we needed to deal with. And as we proceeded with the design, there were additional engineering issues that related to physical and operational site constraints at the site, and also complexities with a lot of the piping systems. This significantly increased the scope of the project, and the estimated construction cost rose from pretty much more than doubled from the $23 million to $58 million. Commensurate with that, the design costs also increased, and we had a first amendment, and now we're asking for consideration of a second amendment. The key takeaway here is that the initial design scope that was based on the safety audit did not and was not able to address the complexities and the difficulty of implementing construction. So what were these additional scope elements and costs that occurred along the way? So the first amendment included some of the additional evaluation that I had mentioned earlier. particularly the ammonia system, and evaluating what type of, what form of the chemical we wanted to use for the treatment process. It also looked at double contained piping and metering pumps for the chemical systems. And then in the second amendment, this is where most of the operational and site constraints became apparent. There were additional piping and controls that were necessary. The design became a lot more complex, requiring additional drawing coordination, and a lot of the as-built had to be reviewed and coordinated with the new design. I think probably the biggest element was the fact that the operational constraints were a lot stricter. We had originally anticipated we'd have more outage period, a larger outage window, because of some of the things that have happened with the environment and climate change and the drought. Our operational outage windows were actually constrained. So that resulted in more temporary facilities being necessary in order to construct the project. The last element I wanted to mention in these amendments, if you've done the math, you'll notice that the total design cost is about $10.4 million. But on my previous slide, the design cost for the CSSIP is about 9.5. And the reason for that is, as part of the amendments, we also had this consultant assist district staff on the design that we're doing in-house for the raw water treatment plant improvements. And that the amendments for those pieces in both Amendment 1 and number 2 total about $0.9 million. So that's how we get down to the $9.5 million for the CSSIP job. So I wanted to talk a little bit about planning and design process for this project, and in general, how we implement our design process for the large and complex projects that occur at our treatment plants. This figure shows on the top line, it kind of looks at the different steps we go through from an initial planning type phase to the beginning of design, where you have a basis of design report and a 10% design, going all the way through 50 to 90% design, and then 100% design. On the bottom line is an indication of what happens as you progress on a project. We do get more information about the nature of the facilities and the project, and the interrelationship between a lot of the systems at the water treatment plants. That happens on any project, any of these complicated water treatment plant projects, and it occurs whether we do the design in-house or whether we contract out to a consultant. In this particular instance, we hired the consultant right after the planning and safety audit that I'd mentioned. And as we went through to up until the 50% design stage, which is where we are now for a lot of the facilities, we're a little bit further on for the Orinda facility. But there were additional planning items that occurred, alternatives analysis that I mentioned, and we also further defined the scope, and the budget becomes more apparent for that project. So this outlines where where the amendment number 1 and the amendment number 2 occurred during the project. So I will say that at the point that the consultant was hired initially, not a lot of information was available at the time, and there was a level of urgency in getting going on the design of the project. And as we moved forward, more of the scope became apparent. What we have been doing and are proposing to do for future complex water treatment plant type projects is to change the point at which if we are going to hire a consultant to do the design, is to change the point at which we hire that consultant. So the idea would be to do to carry the design forward through to probably about the, at least having a basis of design reports and maybe even through the 10% design to better define the scope of the project before we hire a consultant. If we were doing it in-house, we would do the same thing. And go through that and go through the same process before we implement the project in-house. I will say though that even if we end up even if we do that, because of the nature of these complex water treatment plant projects, we will continue to find things as we move along during the design. At the start of the design, there are a lot of unknowns with these complex systems, and the very nature of these projects are that you find more things as you go along. So the hope is that we do a better job upfront with the initial assessment, and we find fewer things that result in smaller contract amendments, maybe at about the 50% design. The other thing that I would like to note is that at the end of the design phase, at the 100% design, we go into construction, we do also like to hire the same consultant who did design, because they are now the engineer of record to provide design support during the construction phase of the job. So in this way, we hope to have better control of the design costs for the project. The other thing that we will be doing is it will provide better transparency of information to both Local 2019 and to the board when they're considering these contracts. One other element to mention, we are continuing to work on our design processes when we hire consultants to set the standards for and expectations for what we require in our design. So we have several hold points at the end of each of the different milestones to make sure that the consultants are delivering what it is that we expect. And we have started to implement that on projects that we have starting right now, and we'll continue to do that in the future. So finally, in summary, the CSSIP design was more complex than originally anticipated. That's very common for a lot of water treatment plant improvements projects. The planning progress, we did have planning progress along with the initial design, and this is also typical for large complex projects. The total design cost, if the amendment is approved today, is 9.5 million, and the construction cost is 58 million. The percentage of the design cost as a percentage of construction is within the range that we expect for design projects. It's about 15%. And so our next steps is we are recommending that you do approve the contract amendment number 2 for the project. We expect to complete detailed design and award a construction contract for the project in the fall of 2021. And as I mentioned earlier, we are implementing new design processes for our large and complex projects to provide better transparency and better control for the design costs. So with that, I will take any questions.
Actually, let's hold questions for just a moment, and I'd like to give Justin the opportunity to make his comments, and then we'll take questions following Justin's presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Hello again, President Young, Board of Directors, GM Chan, and Director Jimmy. Local 2019 opposes CSSIP Second Amendment for design services. And I'm going to say for the reasons why. Local 2019 opposes CSSIP, a Second Amendment for design services due to the lack of upfront planning of the project. Local 2019 opposes CSSIP Second Amendment for design services due to the ballooning cost throughout the contract process. Local 2019 opposes CSSIP Second Amendment for design services because Union was told in June of 2017 this work must be completed quickly and would be complete by October 2018. Local 2019 opposes CSIP Second Amendment for design services because staff is engaged and working on other higher priority water treatment plant work. This is true. The district doesn't have sufficient staff for a project of this complexity and to thoroughly work with and review the consultant's design. Local 2019 opposes CSIP Second Amendment for design services because the knowledge of critical facilities is not retained, and in-house knowledge to maintain facilities is gone. Local 2019 opposes CSIP Second Amendment for design services because the gap between engineering and operation and maintenance is growing even further apart when district handles projects like this. Local 2019 opposes CSIP Second Amendment for design services because the design by Stantec is far from complete from the initial contract proposed. And I personally can attest because I am one of the reviewers of their design. Local 2019 opposes CSIP Second Amendment for design services because even though we're getting professionals for audits, we are not getting engineers with expertise in water treatment plants. We are getting entry-level engineers. Local 2019 opposes CSIP Second Amendment for design services because I'll break down the numbers. At $10.5 million, if we had $300,000 of a salary, that's 35 employees for 1 year. For one employee, that's a salary for 35 years. For two employees, that's about 17 years. Local 2019 opposes CSIP Second Amendment for design services. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Risha, can you leave Justin on available to speak if board members have questions as we go into this
Yes.
part of it? Doug. You're on mute, Doug.
Yes, thank you, President Young. I have a series of questions. My first one just kind of starts out, I think, from what Justin is saying, which is, is the design work that we have that we're contracting out here, is it work that is so technical or anything that we couldn't do it, or is it just a matter of not having the people power to do it, the engineers to do it? I think that's for you, Jimmy.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The work that we've hired this consultant for, some aspects maybe chemical systems are complex and difficult to do, but it is not something that we couldn't perform if we had the number of resources in order to do it. We do have a number of large, water treatment plant type projects that, frankly, we do not have the number of people that would be necessary to do. But so that's the answer. It's not so much a technical issue. We could develop that and work on that. It is more a resource issue.
So when this was first went through in 2017, the primary reason was that it needed, there was an urgency to it. We needed to get it done quickly and everything, and we didn't have the staffing to be able to allocate to that. Is that my understanding? Is that understanding correct? Or it wasn't a technical issue. It was, we just don't have the people power.
Well, there are elements of it that are a technical issue. There is some expertise in chemical systems that we do not have. You could acquire that and you could train people and get to that point. We have talented staff who could learn those types of things, but at the time that the contract was awarded, no, we did not have that expertise.
And is that an ongoing expertise that we need, or is this, again, it sounded to me when you first described it, is that at first there was a plan to get it done all in 1 year, and we just needed to hurry it up. And now we're at year number 4, and we're extending the contract further. Seems like in retrospect, we would have, maybe considered a different route of doing this. You've suggested a different approach to, getting our arms around the size of the project better before we run out and do this. But I'm wondering, even now, is it too late to say, hey, we really need this expertise in-house. We really need to, this is an awfully big contract that we're letting. And it can't help but look at it and say, boy, seems like in retrospect, we should have hired up some more staff at the time and tried to do this work in-house and keep that expertise here and so on. Is that?
Well, I think, Director Linney, it is, if you look at the size of the contract as where we are now, and Justin outlined some numbers about that, there are the number of people that you'd have to hire and the different types of expert in the different specialties areas with, chemical systems, mechanical, electrical. That number of people, I think it would not be a prudent way to go to do that. The staff that we have working on this will acquire knowledge of chemical systems and knowledge of the work that's happening through the review process. And that's exactly how we set it up, so that our district staff is participating in the development of the project. So we are, getting that knowledge transfer for the work. I personally don't think that we would have been able to do it in a different fashion. I think we would have done a little bit more work on the basis of design reports and developing the scope a little bit better, so that we would have been able to provide a better estimate of the costs to you as the board and to Local 2019. But I think the approach would still be the same.
Is it generally cheaper or more expensive to do the same sort of design out of house? I'm assuming it's more expensive, but I don't know. That's a question.
I think it really depends on the project. I don't think it's one way or the other. If you the estimate of the design cost as a percentage of the construction cost estimate is within the range in the industry, and that is the same whether you do it with your staff in-house or whether you hire a consultant to do it.
Okay, and then I'm sorry, Frank, I know you're waving. I just have a few questions here. I wonder if you could take me through a little bit of the process that we use to determine whether to take something out of house or to keep it in-house, whether we decide to hire more staff or to train more staff, or when we see something. Again, this seems like this one kind of came on, that got a jump on us, as opposed to some other projects where we kind of have them on the capital improvement project list for some time. But I wonder if you could help me understand what the process is for determining whether the design work is done in-house or out of house.
So when we look at our CIP and the projects that are planned, we look at two things. We look at, one, whether we have the expertise to do the design completely. And there are often a number of projects where we may have good expertise in some areas, and then not a lot of expertise in specific areas. And in this case, chemical systems is an area at that time where we do not have a lot of the expertise. We also look at how many projects we have in our CIP as we increase our investment in infrastructure. The number of projects that we have to look at and develop and construct has increased, and how many people we require for that is something that we look at. So at the time, at the time of this particular contract, we looked at that, and
You're talking about the original contract, or you're talking about this contract now that you're this extension?
no, well, the original contract and the amendments that followed with it are, you hire a consultant and they become the engineer of record for the project. There are, as you go through a complex treatment plant project, you will find things that you didn't know at the start of the project, and that would happen whether you hired a consultant or whether we did that in-house. But we do, in terms of deciding whether we do it with a consultant or whether we do it in-house, at that time, we look at both the expertise and we look at the available resources, given the other projects that we do have on the books to implement.
And do we have, I mean, have we done that now with this contract renewal? We've also taken a look at where we are now with our expertise, or are we already on this train that this other consultant, the consultant needs to be able to continue this project? Or, I mean, in other words, can we take some of this work back in-house, or is that just not even an option at this point?
I think it would not be a prudent option, because you are taking over a design where you already have an engineer of record. Plus, we have staff committed to other projects that we've laid out and need to implement. There are a number of projects that are already laid out and ready to implement.
All right, I have one last question. Actually, I have other ones, but I'll let other board members ask questions too. Can you give me an honest assessment whether, so Justin has brought up the issue of whether these are junior engineers that are doing this work or otherwise. Are we really satisfied with this consultant or this engineer of record, or are we kind of stuck on this train, as I've kind of said? Do we think they're doing really great work, or we're kind of stuck with them? Or, I mean, can you give me some assessment? We're about to hand a contract extension to them. I'd like to know what your assessment of their work to date has been.
So I think the consultant is doing good work. I recognize that the amendment before you is pretty significant. But I think it is important to also understand, as I've mentioned, the nature of these complex water treatment plant projects. You do find things out as you go along. We have operational constraints and site constraints that are not always evident at the beginning of the project. And as we find those, it results in direction from us and scope addition from the district that also helps increase that cost. So I do recognize Justin is saying that the design is he's not satisfied with the progress on the design, but I do think that the consultant is doing good work. They are a nationally recognized firm that does good work in chemical systems, and I would say we as a district need to look at what our contribution to the increase in scope is, and part of that is our desires for the improvements based on what we find as we go along in the design. So my assessment is that the consultant is performing well. There are things, and we do have, as I said, hold points along the way where if we're not satisfied or they do something incorrect, they do it over. But the amendments we're asking for now are not because we're doing it over, is because we are finding out additional things that we want to incorporate in the scope of the project.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Frank?
So Jimmy and Doug, you got into some of the questions I was going to get into as well. Jimmy, this project, is this every now and again we get into a project that's going to be a one-time project of its nature. Is that what this is? Or is this something that we will continue to have work for?
This particular project is a one-time nature. We're updating the chemical systems at all of our treatment plants. So that's our 5 water treatment plants: Orinda, Lafayette, Walnut Creek, USL, and Sobrante, and also at our Briones facility. So it is a one-time feature. We hope that we are not going to have to upgrade those systems, at least not for very many years in the future. If regulations and codes change, we may have to do that. But we have not done a chemical safety system improvements in as long as I can remember.
Okay. And our staff is monitoring and working alongside of them, if I understood your presentation?
Yes, our staff is monitoring the work. They are working alongside them. And I was just, my team has been texting me. One of the questions that was asked earlier is whether it's cheaper to hire a consultant versus do it in-house. The costs are not that much difference, but I think it is generally cheaper to hire a consultant. But back to your original question, we are monitoring them closely. Every submittal that comes in, we are reviewing. And as Justin has said, we do have staff reviewing their work as it comes in.
Well, my reason for the question has to do with developing institutional knowledge. And in the past, we've used consultants to develop institutional knowledge so that in the future, we're able to take over some things. But you're talking about a lot of facilities here, Jimmy, and that sounds like a pretty fair amount of people that are being brought in to do this work. To the extent that we have people that could augment so that it's more on our own, I have some concerns about that. And while I appreciate that your knowledge and your work, and you've been with the district a very long time, so you've got a pretty good sense of the institution. I still have some concerns in this area. I guess what I would look to see is, because this is a $4 million bump in an existing contract. This isn't pocket change. This is pretty darn serious. And so I'm always of the nature, and Clifford, I'm going to kind of point this to you as well. To the extent that we have people that would be able to use the knowledge and make the work internal going forward, that's where I'm kind of keenly interested in seeing or getting a sense of, will this project give us people within our staff that would do this? And final question is, how many people are working for this consultant doing this job?
I guess I don't have the number offhand as to how many people are on the consultant staff. That is information that I can get back to you unless one of my staff tells me, sends me a message about that in the interim here.
All right, that's right.
Clifford, can you opine a little bit here on the sort of general direction?
Yeah, I mean,
Clifford, before you do that,
yep.
I did get the information from my staff. So in terms of the number of people working, that number is about 30 people.
Are those full-time equivalents, Jimmy, or 30 people, that individual named people who are associated with the project for 1 hour to full-time hours?
I think that is 30 individual people with varying levels of time committed to the project.
It'd be good to know how many FTEs that is, if they count it that way. I know consultants don't necessarily.
So as far as Director Mellon's questions about institutional knowledge, That's always a consideration. We've been spending a lot of time. I think Director Mellon is probably aware of some of the work with Bayworks and other. But internally, it's important for us to capture a lot of this knowledge, regardless of whether it's contracted out work or done by district forces, because anybody can leave. Even if you're an employee, you can leave. And what's important is that not all the knowledge resides with an individual, but we have a method to capture the information. So that's something that we've been developing for many years, and that will be true for any project, this project as well. It's certainly trickier for projects that, as Jimmy has described, is a one-time project that you'll do maybe every many decades. But I think what's as important is how do we capture that information, not only in terms of operating procedures, but making sure that all the drawings and the as-built are done correctly, so that any engineer coming in, whether it's a district staff person or a consultant, will know what's been built.
Thanks, Clifford. Director Katz.
How long is the work anticipated to go pursuant to this contract? We've been working on it since 2017, but how much longer do you expect this contract to be utilized?
I expect it to be probably another nine months or so. We are looking to finish the design and advertise the project for construction in the fall of 2021.
And if we were to use district forces for the work, how long would that delay the work for going out to bid?
We have not done that particular assessment, but I would say you're looking at least a year delay in terms of getting it done, pulling people off other projects to get that done. If we're talking about 30 people with different types of expertise and working different amounts on the project, I think that would be a significant impact to our current workload.
Do we have vacant positions right now in these engineering classifications?
Very few. We have a total of about in the entire engineering department. I think we have probably on the order of about 10 vacancies now in the particular classifications that would do this kind of work. I would suspect it's one or so, and we are recruiting for those positions now. We have one. We have an electrical engineer position and a number of designer positions that I'm probably more focused on pipeline design than this type of work. But there are very few vacancies that we have right now.
So it's a particular kind of engineer that would be assigned to this work. It's not all of the engineers would be specialized in this specific type of project, but some are designated for it.
Yeah, you would have, there are different disciplines involved. We have electrical, we have some mechanical, we have civil engineers involved, instrumentation and control folks that would be needed to actually implement it.
For the engineers that would be working on this project that whose skill sets could overlap the proposed contract, what work exists in our capital improvement plan beyond the horizon of this project that they could work on?
So that's a good question. Right now, we do have a large number of engineers who are working on a water treatment plant improvement project. So the Upper San Leandro water treatment plant reliability upgrades is one significant large project that we are working on right now. That's being done in-house. We have, I don't know the exact numbers, but we have a significant number of our staff working on that. And that's about a $50 million construction job. So we are doing that one in-house. We just do not have the and that requires individuals with different expertise, the electrical, mechanical, structural, civil that I mentioned, all coming together to implement that project. So where we do have, so we are getting, having people working on those types of projects and acquiring that expertise. which is transferable to other facilities that may be designed by consultants, but we are getting expertise on water treatment plant improvements with our own staff.
What I'm getting at, thank you, that's very helpful to know. What I'm getting at is, can we fill this vacancy that you mentioned exists? Can we consider in our upcoming budget cycle creating additional, how many additional positions would it be reasonable to create and fill without having idle hands 3 years down the road? That's the type of information that I'm interested in. And then if that were 2 additional positions or 5 additional positions, whatever number that is, then what amount of contracting out is reasonable with that exhausted in-house work? That's the information that I'm interested in.
And that's a very good question, Director Katz, and line of thinking, because we are thinking exactly the same thing. And at the budget workshop in January, we do plan on on presenting information along those veins in terms of what it would take to do the work for infrastructure investment that we have laid out, and how we would actually implement that. So that is a line of thinking that we are also considering.
That completes my questions. I'd be interested in what my other colleagues think about in terms of, given that coming together of how to limit contracting out, how do we act on this contract in front of us? Because it does seem like we don't have a clear plan for how to achieve the expansion of or filling of vacancies, but we do have this need for some work in front of us.
I have a couple of questions, but I want to see if there are other board members, John or Lisa, Bill, that would like to speak.
Sure, this is John. I didn't raise my hand, sorry. I just pushed unmute. I think the project itself is critical in terms of being dealt with. Granted, it's been going on a long time. I like how Jimmy's approaching basically, if you want to call it, cost benefit analysis of what our needs are for the future. And I think, Andy, your question is how not making sure we don't have idle hands down the road. If we need the employees, that's great. But we want to make sure that with the employees that we do bring on in whatever capacity are going to be able to perform and not have a lack of work to be done. So I like the approach that Jimmy's looking at with Clifford on this. Personally, I think the project needs to be moving forward rather than delaying it a year or more.
I'm not seeing other board members.
Other questions, but I'll let you go first, Marguerite.
Yeah, so completely lost my train of thought for a second. The question I have is maybe it's partly a question for Justin as well, but the change, the modification that you're proposing going forward, I mean, I think I'm kind of actually, here's my first question. What would have happened in that near miss? What was the potential consequence of the near miss at the San Pablo treatment plant?
I guess the potential consequence could have been if there was if the tank itself had ruptured and somebody was close by, they could have been injured, or if the materials themselves got released into the environment, got into a stream, that would have been an environmental issue. So those are really the two potential consequences of that type of incident.
Okay, so potentially somebody could have died or been seriously injured, and the environment. So, I mean, it sounds, it does seem like it has become on the size of the project is quite large, which it at least hopefully tracks with the level of work that needs to be done to address these safety issues. So I do think that it's important to get it done, and it's too bad that it hasn't been completed already. So on that score, I think, I do agree with the urgency, but it also troubles me that the scope of the project was not better understood sooner, and that I guess I'm wondering if we think that this proposed change in really better understand, because I'm assuming that district forces would be better able to understand the complexities and the operational challenges and constraints because there are folks, they know what we've done and how we put things together over, they know what our Rube Goldberg setup is. Not that it's Rube Goldberg-esque by any stretch, but versus a consultant who has to come in and learn it. So I guess what I'm wondering is if we are contemplating that we're really going to understand the scope of work before we contract out design, but I didn't hear you say that. I heard you say that we might contract out that initial design and scope of work. And I'm just wondering, both from you, Jimmy, and also I think from Justin, does, sort of slowing our roll a little bit to better understand the scope of work help the process work better?
I could go first. I think that's exactly what we need to do. If you look at what I said earlier this morning, we have exactly the same thing going on at Orinda UV. We also have what Jimmy said, $15 million that district forces are designing at USL. We need to space out our projects. What is what we need to do. How are we expected to do all this work at one time? We have to construct it right after. How is construction going to handle all this construction? We're dealing with this now. And the question about idle hands is, design division is so swamped with work for the next X amount of years that you don't have to worry about idle hands. Jimmy would love to have more people. I have no doubt Jimmy would love more staffing. But we have to have a better understanding of what the projects are, better planning, and space out the projects. It's like you said, President Young, we need to slow our roll just in general. It's just too much happening at one time. Everything is a crisis, and consultants aren't the answer.
Thank you. Jimmy, do you have a thought?
Well,
I'm assuming you're...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
As I mentioned, this is an issue that we are grappling with, and we will have an approach to present at the budget workshop in January. There is a balance that we need to maintain here. There is work that needs to be done. Some of it is urgent or more urgent than others, but there is a balance between how fast we implement the projects. We could slow, as Justin said, slow our roll and defer projects out so we can do everything in-house. But the risk you run with that is that you have aging facilities with needed improvements that you're then running longer, and you run the risk of something catastrophic happening with those facilities while you're slowing your roll. So there is a balance that we have to try and maintain, and that's one of the things that we're are looking at and hoping to present as part of the budget process.
Right. I mean, I've become initially, I was very unhappy with our rate of pipeline replacement, but I have come to very much appreciate the risk matrix that staff has developed, and think that something like that, it would help us board members better understand. I mean, you guys are living it every day. We are overseeing it, and I think don't really have necessarily our hands around the beast as well as we could or should be expected to, and understanding where, both designing a risk matrix that helps us understand those balancing decisions, and capture some of the, the nuance or complexity, might be a helpful, it would be helpful for me anyway, to have something like that to evaluate, where we are in the, district forces versus not, urgency versus, complexity versus, institutional knowledge, et cetera. So I will leave it at that. I don't know that there's more that, I'm just getting a notice that my internet connection is unstable. So let me pass it off to Doug in case I go out.
So I wanted to ask just two more questions, I think. One is, when you're in the process of trying to figure out both short-term and long-term, whether some sort of work, in this case, we're talking about design work, is done in-house or out-of-house. You took me through the process a little bit, or at least some of the factors that are decided. We have a contracting out committee. At what point in the process are they consulted? Is it a collaborative kind of consultation, or is it, here's what we've decided, take a look at it? Or is it, hey, we're trying to figure out whether we've got the staffing internally to do this or not, or whether we really need to contract this out? If you guys got some ideas, how does that work? Is there a consultation with line staff, or is it all just a managerial sort of thing?
No, there is a, I guess, as you would put it, a consultation. I mean, there are discussions between the supervisory and management staff and the staff who are doing the work. That is part of the process. Ultimately, I think, the managers and supervisors have a responsibility to figure out how the work gets done. But there is consultation and collaboration. That's one of the things that I am high on in making sure that happens. But also, we do have the contracting out committee, which is a more formal, a slightly more formal process where that information is presented to the unions and the rationale for the contracting out of the work is part of the process that we go through. So I think both things do happen. There's the more formal process, but there's also the more informal process within the department and with other departments in terms of how the project can be implemented.
And do you feel comfortable that the sum total of that process is a collaborative one, a creative one that says, hey, if we did this, if we delayed this project some, or if we moved this up, or if we hired 2 more people, or this looks like it would be a great job to contract out, we don't need to do that. Do you feel like that process works, or is that something that maybe could use a little tweaking? Because this, I can't help but say, looking at this sounds like, yeah, there's a reason for all this happen, and excuses maybe, but there's something about this that doesn't feel like it was done in an optimal way. And again, I'm looking, I guess, for some sense. You gave us some, but any other sense of where we might need to make some improvements to avoid these kinds of situations?
I think what I've said previously is really where we need to come down on is how quickly do we want to do all these. It really comes down to the balance of how quickly do we need to implement these projects versus how much can we do in-house with the financial pressures of how many staff we can accommodate in at the district. Those are the things that that's where we need to find our balance here. If we had unlimited resources, Yeah, I'd say keep everything in-house, but I think the reality is we don't have unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited staffing. If we did, I would say we do everything in-house. But we do need to find that balance, and there are competing interests, competing projects. Water treatment plant projects are a large part of what we need to work on. But you know, we've got, as Director Young mentioned, we've got pipeline rebuild, we've got pumping plants and reservoirs, we've got our facilities all the way up to Part D and down. There is a lot of infrastructure that we need to invest in to keep in good shape. And we don't have the unlimited in-house staffing in order to do that.
And I'll add to that, Jimmy, just on, you know, the discussion was Local 2019 or anyone. I mean, before that, we also have shared with the board and with staff, I mean, there's a certain sequence in which we have to do all of these projects. And so just understanding that some projects need to come before the others. And we're seeing a lot of water treatment plant work right now. I mean, I've been with the district quite some time, and besides Walnut Creek Treatment Plant, I mean, this is a pretty big surge in treatment plant work that we're doing. And even if we did have, as Jimmy said, maybe unlimited staff, I don't think we're going to have this level of work at the treatment plants for an unlimited amount of time either. And so that's the balance that we have to take is, you know, is this work that's going to be ongoing work, which is a question the board had asked? Is this work that's going to be one time? Is this work specialized work that it wouldn't make sense to train a few staff on this one? These are all considerations. And I've sat in the contracting out meetings with Jimmy as well. These are discussions that are had with the union to understand all the considerations we make before we go out and decide to recommend contracting out work.
All right. So last question I have is, you know, we're left with a decision on a specific sort of thing today. We're not presented really with any alternatives here. It more or less looks like this is how we're set up to do things, and perhaps the discussion today was more of a an educational moment, if you will, for help the board understand how these things are done, and maybe a little bit of an inward look on how we might be able to do them better. I'm just curious, are there other options or things that we have today that would allow us some actionable item other than passing this? Frank, this is a general question. I don't know if you were addressing that or you had a different question, but.
Well, I think you're on the right track, Doug. The thing that I see is I'm uncomfortable with the delay that would be put in this project, but I think I would toss out there this thought. If I would go forward with this, but I would expect to see in the budget discussion in January some really serious input on when we have projects of this size, whether or not it makes sense to hire folks, because very specifically what we have happening is we got a lot of retirements at the retirement board this last time. We got a lot of them coming up. Talking with the Aqua folks, they're talking about a gray tsunami coming, and we're on the cusp of that ourselves. So hiring these engineers that are specialized, I don't mean to make the engineering profession sound all that easy to go from one thing to another, but really and truly, you have good engineers, you get them into one project, and as I recall over the years, we then have vacancies occur and we move them into another area. And sometimes the area is so remote that it doesn't even make sense. But it's because engineers do good things. You know, just think about Richard Harris. What was Richard Harris before he took over water conservation? We put him in there because he's an engineer, because the darn thing was such a mess. And he never became an engineer anymore after that. So President Young and Doug and folks, I will move the item reluctantly, but with the strong caveat that at the budget workshop, I want to hear what we're doing vis-a-vis staffing, because if we're spending this much money on this, I'd just as soon spend it on employees than spend it on a contractor. That's all I got, Marguerite. I'm moving the item.
I'll second the item.
All right, is there any further discussion?
Yeah, Clifford, I think I'd be interested just to kind of hear your take or summation of kind of what you're hearing and that.
Yeah, I think Director Mellon captured it well. I mean, this project does have a certain sense of urgency, and we'll move forward with this. But to come back at the budget workshop and discuss, the balances in terms of, what we should do in terms of bringing on more staff, what's the cost of bringing on staff, and also how does that reflect in the recommended rates? I mean, there are costs for everything that we're going to do, and so bring back something a little more comprehensive in terms of what our recommendation for staffing is. And I also heard President Young talk about coming back and having discussion about a risk matrix to have the board have a better understanding of how we're prioritizing and how we're sequencing all of this work.
I think that captured it.
Yeah.
Remember, I'm very heavy on this idea of once you reach a certain amount of hours of paying somebody else to do this work, it becomes better to have that training and staff in-house, because there will be enough turnover to find work for these people as time becomes. So I'm sorry.
That's generally my take on it as well, Frank. I think that's where I'm coming from as well.
Yeah,
I would agree with that as well. Andy's nodding his head. Can't see Lisa. Assume she'd be nodding her head as well. We'll see. Okay. Let's have a roll call vote, please. Oh, there's Lisa. She's nodding her head. Okay. and Bill seems to be frozen, but I'm thinking he'd be nodding his head too. So, all right. And no, I don't know what John's doing, waving his hands in the air. Okay. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
This is a roll call vote for consent item number 7. Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
yes, with the comments that I had noted along with the yes.
okay,
Sorry, Marguerite.
Patterson.
Bill, you're
Director
muted.
Patterson, you're muted.
Yes.
And President Young.
Also a reluctant yes. Okay, the item passes with reluctance. Noted. All right, let's.
She's muted. You're muted, President Young.
Hang on. Okay, that takes us to discussion, determination and discussion. And we have the general manager's report, which includes the coronavirus update and the collection strategy for delinquent accounts update.
So as you noted, we have 2 items for the general manager's report. The first is a coronavirus update. And while we've heard a lot of good news about the vaccines for COVID-19, we're also seeing a surge in cases and hospitalizations in California. Dave Briggs, Director of Operations and Maintenance, will share the latest information for the counties in which we operate, how we're responding, and our most recent COVID numbers.
Good afternoon, President Young, and safe travels to you. And good afternoon, members of the board.
Good afternoon.
So on slide 2, we're showing the familiar statewide framework for progressing counties through the tiers, and this is mostly here for your reference. There haven't been any significant updates to this framework, although as the governor announced, I think early last week when he coined the phrase applying the emergency brake, when he saw the rapidly rising COVID cases in the state of California, there were some tweaks to this system that allow the state to rapidly regress and place counties into more restrictive tiers. And so counties can skip tiers and there's no wait period. Other than that, the framework is largely the same. So as Clifford was alluding to, here are the latest numbers as of last week, but as the board knows, the state adjusts their numbers every Tuesday around noon or 12:30 or so. And I did sneak a peek at it earlier. The only change that I'm aware of now is that Calaveras County is now regressed to the red tier. Amador is remaining the same. And of course, the Bay Area counties and the Central Valley counties that we operate in will remain in the purple. The board's also aware that at the state level and at the Bay Area County level, various health officers are discussing travel restrictions and quarantining for people that are traveling. I'll discuss the curfew on the next slide. But by and large, these are structured as recommendations and they're not promulgated or manifesting themselves in the way of an order or an executive order yet. And I would say here, just seeing the numbers, knowing that winter is coming, knowing that the holidays are upon us, and these numbers have stabilized, but we're nowhere close to saying these numbers are going to go down yet. So with all these factors, I think we're going to be in the purple here, probably till the first of the year, and not going to be talking about moving into less restrictive tiers for a while. So the district operations remain stable, and just to give you more updates at the state level, last week, or I think maybe at the end of the prior week, the state established a statewide face covering guidelines, which by and large didn't present any new challenges to the district or to the Bay Area counties, as we've been by and large operating with these types of restrictions that were established statewide, so there weren't too many changes there. And that applies both at work and for those members of the public that are visiting our recreational sites. So no changes there from our perspective. The limited stay-at-home order, which was established through, I believe, executive order late last week, I think it was last Thursday, that did exempt essential work, so it shouldn't impact the district either. That curfew is effectively what it is, applies between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. And even though we do have workforce members that do travel to work in the off hours, whether it's for a shift, an operational shift, or responding to some unplanned outage or main break, our employees always carry ID with them. So even if they're not in an East Bay MUD vehicle, we don't anticipate them running into any problems. We are continuing to prepare for a higher case rate or caseload at the district, and this is by and large working with the human resources staff, making sure that we have people available to conduct contact tracing and to be there for employees when they have questions. As the board is aware, 2 recent changes in state law have made this administratively a little bit more difficult. One law became immediately applicable in September. Another one takes place January 1st. So we'll be prepared to administer all of those wrinkles and all those reporting requirements that come with new state law. But this is time consuming, and make no mistake about it. We don't anticipate any changes to our protocols internally, and we continue to ensure that our operators remain safe. They have been doing a great job keeping themselves healthy. They're imperative, obviously, to keeping the district running. And one thing that's new is that in normal winter time, as demand starts to decrease, we would normally take water treatment plants offline and take the operations staff and move them to various other plants to take shifts or conduct maintenance. We're obviously not doing that. We're trying to keep the people that, for example, staff the Lafayette treatment plant together or staff Sobrante water treatment plant together so we don't cross-pollinate folks, so to speak, or contaminate folks going from place to place. So we're really making sure our protective measures for our operators stay in place. We have adequate PPE in the warehouse, so we're ready. And we have had not 23, but actually 24 positives to date. We had another one yesterday on Monday. And today we had a 5th contractor. So it's up to date. It's 24 positives in the last, say, month and a half. So definitely a bit of an uptick.
Hey, Frank Mellon here. Of the 23 positives to date, how many have returned back to work?
So, Director Mellon, with the exception of the people who are still isolating right now, and there are, I think one person is isolating and 13 or 14 are actually in quarantine. But of the other employees who have been confirmed COVID positive prior, I believe they're all back at work.
Okay. I would appreciate just a memo, and I'm sure the rest of the board, something that says how many are still out and how many are at work.
And then Dave, have we had anybody hospitalized?
So, as
Or
you,
do we know, does that go into
yeah, I think,
problematic area?
you know, and whether they were hospitalized for COVID reasons or something related, it's definitely a gray area. But I think probably I would reserve comment from Laura Acosta on that matter. But to my knowledge, I do not think anybody has been seriously hospitalized with COVID-19.
Good. Good.
Thank you.
So this last slide gets a little bit to some of the questions we just heard, and this graphic is familiar. We've been showing it for a while, and it's very helpful to the emergency operations team and to the board. It shows essentially the staff that are missing work and not contributing due to the pandemic. And we have seen an increase in recent pay periods, going up to roughly 3 FTE not at work. Now keep in mind, some people who are quarantining are telecommuting, and that's not reflected here because they're at home making a contribution. So these are people not making a contribution for COVID-related reasons. And I would also say that we have through November 8th, the last pay period concluded on November 22nd. Based on what I know right now, I suspect the next blue bar will be at least higher than the November 8th one. The shape of this curve looks a little too familiar to me. I've seen this shape, I think, in my dreams, as well as just about every COVID number, this general shape, this double peak. We're seeing at Alameda County COVID positive numbers, state of California, even nationally. So this shape is familiar to the greater conditions. And with hopefully the actions that the governor just took and the greater restrictions and the curfew, perhaps we can counterbalance the wintertime and the holidays and get these numbers to drive even lower. But I think the point that I'll end on is that even though we have and are seeing an uptick, it's primarily to the credit of our employees and our supervisors, as we know, who are not transmitting this at work. It is very, very rare that that happens. We do have people that get it, as you just saw, and we're able to nip it in the bud, and that is what is protecting the district. So I'm confident that the district is fine, and we'll continue to try to focus on taking care of our employees as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Dave. Good report. Put your mask back on.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, so for the next item, this morning at the Finance Administration Committee meeting, we discussed the use of flow restrictors in the payment collection process as an alternative to water shutoffs. We're going to share with you now our discussion from this morning, which followed up on a number of questions the board asked at the October 27th board meeting. We do believe that the use of flow restrictors offers a good balance between the human right to water and sending a strong signal to customers who would have in the past reached shutoff status. We're seeking to get concurrence from the board today to move forward with this strategy. And with that, Andrew Lee, Manager of Customer and Community Services, will make the presentation.
Well, good afternoon, board members, and thank you so much for the introduction, Clifford. And so we met this morning at the Finance Committee, and the committee offered a number of thoughtful suggestions to make the concept even better as we move forward. And I will go over those as part of the presentation to the board. Please move to the next slide, please. So to start, I will just give a short recap on our delinquency trend that was reported out to the board about a month ago. Some of the additional work we have done in response to the board's input, and kind of a portfolio of programs we have developed along the way to support our customers. And then finally, getting to the next steps, how we advance this effort. So you may recall that since the district suspended shut-off activities. We now have about a little bit over 7,000 single-family customers that are unable to pay their bill, and they have reached the shut-off status. And we understand that if the district go back to the normal practice of shut-off after the moratorium is lifted, we could affect as many of those customers. And one thing I want to note that more than 55% of those customers are in the disadvantaged communities. So as an alternative, we propose the use of the flow restrictors as an alternative to maintain a level of water service for those customers who cannot pay their bill, but also facing shutoff. The intent is really use this tool to provide a clear signal to the customer about the past due bill. We also recognize that there are certain financial exposures associated with using flow restrictors, since right now we don't know how effective the device would be in terms of prompting actions from the customers. But we also discuss those exposures can be reduced through a number of existing tools we already have at the district, and that's through our lien authority, third-party vendor collection services, as well as really targeted and enhanced communication with our customers to make sure they are aware of the number of programs we have in place for them to access. Slide 4, please. So during the last update, a concern raised by the board is the cost of installing a flow restrictor, especially for those customers that are in a low-income community. We share the same concern with the board, and we have looked really hard in terms of how we can make that effective. But in terms of cost, the flow restrictor is, we can say that it's similar to the cost of having a water service shut off. Because anytime when a water is shut off, the district would have to provide 2 service trips to go out to the property, one to turn off the water and one to restore it. And that cost for those 2 trips equates to $100. And that's comparable to the $127 for a flow restrictor that it would be installed on a smaller meter. And because we know that more than 98% of our single family customers have meter sizes that are 1 inch and smaller. And so we do expect most, if not all, of the flow restrictor will be installed at the $127 rate. But even if that's the case, we do understand that $127 is quite significant for our low income customers. And so that the board can consider offering customers in our CAP program to offset some of those free fees. And to do that, we already have the framework in place to allow us to offset this cost for CAP customers. For example, we offer a 50% credit on our water use for customers up to 1,050 gallons per month per capita in a household. We also provide a 35% credit on wastewater charges. And another example I like to use is that we also, when we set up account for new customers that are on CAP, they do get a 50% credit on this establishment fee. So we already have a framework in place to allow us to do that for CAP customers. So of course, by adopting a lower fee for CAP customers, it would greatly reduce their impact financially. So one suggestion that raised by the finance committee that was discussed this morning was really looking at how to apply the reduction in that $127 for customers who are have a flow restrictor installed and they're not on CAP yet, but they are applying for CAP. And when they become eligible for CAP, is there a way to have that reduction take place kind of retroactively for the $127? And we will definitely look into that as part of the implementation plan, and we will share our finding and recommendation going forward. And that will be discussed more in the CAP workshop in February this coming year. Next slide, please. So we're on slide number 5. So another concern that shared by the board is really how much water is coming to the home after the device is installed on a meter. So obviously we have a very complex water system, and every installation will likely to vary from location to location depending on where the home is in relationship to our reservoir. And so because of that, you may have different results. And the district system also have a pressure range between anywhere 40 PSI from the very low end to about 130 PSI at the high end. So to make sure that we do have enough water provided for basic needs, we did some tests in the yards with a meter shop. And the picture on your lower left-hand side is the assembly we put together, kind of put the whole system in a range of tests. We ran it through anywhere from 40 PSI to the upwards of 120 PSI to really see how much water is being delivered using the flow restrictor. And what we find that is that even at 40 PSI, we did verify that there is enough water that comes through the meter to allow for basic needs for hand sanitation, as well as some food, prep work for food. Now, the videos, if you recall, the 3 videos you saw a month ago, that was at a location that has a pressure range of 65 PSI. So it's more on towards the lower end of the spectrum of this 40 to 130 range. So for the flow, we are proposing half a gallon per minute. And that is about 25% more than what we had originally proposed of the 0.4 GPM flow rate. And that's also the video, what you saw in the earlier videos, that was at a 0.4 GPM flow rate. So increasing it to 0.5 would slightly improve that flow rate into the home. The proposed flow rate is actually consistent with a lot of what other water agencies use, where they have adopted a flow restrictor program to manage the delinquencies. In fact, Yarra Valley in Australia have been using the same 0.5 GPM flow rate for the last 20 years actually, and they found it successful in their program. So ultimately, I do want to reiterate that the flow restrictor is intended to be an alternative to our regular shutoff process. And the intent is really to provide enough water to meet some basic needs. And in our earlier study, we looked at a range of flow, and the flow rate, anything higher than 0.5 GPM is actually not recommended because it will actually reduce the overall effectiveness of the program. We do recognize that there will be some inconveniences once the device is installed, but really the issue that we're dealing with is that we want to provide a clear signal that there's past due bill, and we want to maintain a level of access to water, and it is actually a better alternative of having no water at all. Next, please. Slide number 6. Here is our proposed process of how to notify customers about the flow restrictor if one is up for installation. And this is a very similar process that we use for our shutoffs. And similar to that, really the goal of the flow restrictor program, if we decided to move forward with it, is really to help customers to avoid this very difficult and unwanted step. And how we attempt to accomplish that is really to expand on our outreach activity to customers that are having financial hardships about the many programs we have available to them. And we will essentially follow, here, I wouldn't go through it step by step, but essentially we're going to follow the exact same process for our notification for shutoffs. But we are adding a different element to the notification process. As you can see in step 5, we are proposing, assuming that we have resources to do so, is to make some outbound calls to customers at step 5. So they do get a notification from us that this is coming, and make arrangement with the district to avoid this step, which is step 6. And as you can see that entire process will take almost, the customer will have nearly 100 days to make arrangement with the district to avoid this step. So that means within that 100 days, they can call us up to make payment arrangements, to make payment plans, extensions, get on cap. And so all those are available to them throughout the entire process. So one suggestion the finance committee had for this slide is, can we make multiple calls instead of just having one outbound call to customers to remind them that they have those options? And the answer to that is, it is yes, if we have the resource for it. We have to look at it closely as we develop the implementation plan to see what resources needed to make not just one call, but 2 calls to the customers to inform them of either those step 6 is coming, as well as the programs we have available to help them get through that, to avoid those steps. So like I said, flow restrictors is, again, only install after all notices that we're issuing have exhausted, and that the customers have remained unresponsive to the district. There are exceptions. So as you know, even in our shut-off guideline, customers with medical conditions who can provide a certification from their doctor are exempt from shut-off. In this case, we are following the same footprint that if a customer with medical condition can provide a note from the doctor, will be exempt from the flow restrictor. Next slide, please. So since the flow restrictor is intended to provide a continuous but limited water flow, that means that the customer will continue to accrue charges on their water use. And because the flow restrictor limits the amount of water being used, the weirs being accumulated would stay low, even when the customers do not respond to the flow restrictor immediately. This was a concern that brought up by the board in the last meeting. But in the meantime, the device would continue to signal to the customer to pay their bill, or actually make contact with the district for other arrangements, as I mentioned earlier. We also look at this as an opportunity for us to get in touch with the customer, to encourage customers who are eligible for CAP, apply for CAP. And from our communications with Yarra Valley in Australia, they have found that many of their customers do respond to the flow restrictor pretty timely. And in fact, one of the positive trend they're seeing is that a lot of the customers who are eligible for CAP that actually have a flow restrictor installed on their account actually apply for CAP. So we hope to see the same trend, except that hopefully we can see it before a device is installed. And seeing what Yarra Valley is able to accomplish with the program, our proposed program could be as effective as shut off in terms of providing a clear signal on the past due bill, but we can do so by not shutting off water completely. So, and this morning we did have a very good discussion with the committee about making the payment plan more flexible. One of the concerns that expressed by the finance committee is that some customers may have a pretty large unpaid bill probably by the end of the moratorium, and we are concerned about that. And one of the things that we could look at is really become more flexible with how we design payment plans for customers, and we could customize on a case by case depending on the unique situation of each account. One of the things that we do have a limitation on how long we can provide payment plans, and typically that's 12 months, but it doesn't mean that we cannot create a payment plan that is have a smaller set of payments upfront. Let's say the first 11 months would be a small payment, and have a balloon payment towards the 12th month, And then if the customer is having difficulty with dealing with the final payment installment, that we can use that to reapply towards another subsequent payment plan for them so they can manage their finances more comfortably. So slide number 8, please. And as suggested by the board in the last meeting, we also looked at the possibility of offering a retro discount for customers who are applying for a cap. And the board may recall that we actually had this discussion with the board back in January 2019 during the cap workshop. And based on our assessment back then, retro cap would create an incentive for applicants to carry a delinquent balance just to get the additional discount. And retro cap discount on delinquent balances also viewed as inconsistent with our own policies that encourages all customers to pay their bill on time. It can also view as unfair for those who new to the program, as well as existing participants who come into the program without a delinquent balance. There will be some administrative costs to manage that process, and the benefit is very limited to a very small number of customers. And coming to, talking about resources, we want to also focus on our resources now on really processing the increased number of applications we're seeing in the contact center for CAP. Our application numbers have almost like double on a monthly basis. So we want to make sure that we continue to process those applications daily to make sure that the program benefits are being offered within 30 days when we receive those applications. So with that, in 2019, the board did direct staff to focus on increasing CAP enrollment instead, and that's going to be through targeted outreach. And since that time, we did grow the program from 6,800 CAP participants to nearly 8,200 as of today. So that is a pretty significant growth of the program, and that is really about communication and making sure the customers are aware of this type of program available to them. Next slide, please. So for us, what does a good flow restrictor program would look like? Well, it's really all about the features that is supporting it, because we want to make sure that our customers do not have to experience the impact of that device. And to do that, we are going to be very aggressive to get customers on CAP. We're going to offer flexible payment plans and extensions when it's needed. There is this ongoing effort that we still are working with the city of Oakland, Berkeley, and Emeryville to try to get a credit on their sewer collection charges. We are making progress. I know this is a bit slow, but I'm hoping that in a couple months in the next CAP workshop, I have some good news to share with the board. I understand Oakland is trying to move this thing forward. So there will be more for me to report in a couple months. Beyond the financial assistance, we will offer a range of other programs such as conservation review to really help customers to really manage their water use. And we know that the lower water use also equals to a lower water bill. And that's going to be one of our main focuses for our customers. And beyond those, and for customers who suspect that their private water system may expose them to lead, we do offer a testing kit at no cost to the customers to test the tap water. And with all those great programs, the key is that we need to have good outreach, good communication, and education, so the customers do become aware of what is available to them. So they are only as good, this programs we talk about here is only as good as, getting customers accessing them. And for the proposed flow restrictor program is, the way I see it it's not simply just about the device itself, but it's more about having a comprehensive toolbox to help really all customers, but especially the most vulnerable in maintaining a water service. Next slide, please. So we're on slide number 10. So with that in mind, our goal is to have an implementation plan in place to manage delinquencies after the executive orders is lifted. Of course, that is going to be done after an extensive round of outreach to our customers to make sure they are aware of what can be potentially the impact, but along the way, make sure they're aware that there's other options and to make payment plans with the district, get on cap and getting extensions. And that for us, in order for us to get the implementation plan started, we would need the board to first adopt a resolution to express our intent to implement flow restrictor as a collection strategy going forward. And next slide, please. So the board have seen this slide before, and this will be the same guiding principles and actions that we will use to guide the development of the resolution for the board's consideration in 2 weeks. I'm going to pause here a little bit before I get to the next steps, and I want to make sure we have an opportunity to discuss with the board if there are any questions and concerns or suggestions so far from what you hear.
I think it's amazing, Andrew. Keep it up.
Who's got, okay, I see Bill. I definitely want in. Lisa is waving her hand. So I got Bill, then Lisa, then Doug, then Andy.
I believe I'm unmuted this time.
Yeah.
Let me just say that we gave this extensive time this morning in our committee meeting. One of the things I want to say immediately, though, I think staff should be complimented. And Cliff, I think you did a good job of making that presentation and also coordinating the staff. It appears to me that this is a good alternative. If you have a leaking in the dike, you can lose all the water and then you won't have anything to run the district on. So you have to shore it up. You also have to do comprehensive outreach to the people to make sure that there is contact and that they understand. There are exceptions in the proposed to take care of those people who have medical conditions. I think one of the things that you find is that in this day and time, if you're not directing traffic, then you're part of the problem. And the passing on of expense to those people who pay their bills is in fact a violation of 218. So you have to be very careful that we don't just patronize and go along and maybe render some service to some people. I think the fact that we have agencies that are set up to provide even financing to help some of the disadvantaged people, but the education that they get and the fact that they're not denied water completely, to me, are two of the basics. So I wanted to make sure I got up early this time and not late. And again, Cliff, I want to commend you for bringing this to our attention. We know that it's done outside of the country. Many of you may or may not know, but we were present in Australia and we made sure that in Australia, EBMUD brought to the table some of those things that helped them turn around. And they used this method there. They're also using it in the hottest area we have in the country, and that's down in Arizona. Even though they still allow some water, this is even done with the good customers. So just think about it. I want to just get on board and say, these are things that we covered in my committee meeting this morning. I don't want to be redundant to have to come back to this later. So I'm bringing you everything right now. The committee, in fact, did recommend it on to the full board.
Thank you, Director Patterson. I got Lisa, then I don't remember what the order is I had. Lisa's next though.
Hang on. Okay, my video is there. I raised concerns during the last presentation on this issue, and I'm still not convinced, but I will be supportive. I will take a look-see position and hope it all turns out well. Thank you.
Okay, I know Doug. We're going to make the round. So Doug, you're next. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, could you remind me what your concerns you had raised? It sounds like you're still a little not convinced on or something.
No, I'm not. And we're past 3 o'clock already, so I'm not going to rehash my concerns from 2 weeks ago. They are part of the record.
All right, I'll go look it up.
Thank you.
All right, I was just going to say I commend staff as well. I think a lot of work has been put into this, a lot of thought, and I'm ready to support this. And not to say it's perfect or that we won't have to monitor this as it goes on and in every which way, but it's definitely at a point where I'm ready to support.
Good start.
Okay. I don't know. Let's see. K comes before M. Andy, then Frank.
I want to thank the staff for taking some of the input into account and briefing the committee and the board on these issues. In an ideal world, nobody would need a flow restrictor, just like we wouldn't have to have any shutoffs. And I think that this approach, doing flow restrictors, can only be better than the approach where we had water shutoffs. So this seems like a positive step forward to being able to not completely disconnect customers from an essential need of water, but to still make sure that we have an incentive to get our bills paid, which supports the financial health of our public agency. What concerned me at our last meeting was the potential hefty charge of the flow restrictor installation, which was more expensive than the shutoff charge and the reconnection charge. So I was concerned about being more punitive to customers who fell behind on their charges. What I'm hopeful for, and frankly, an assumption of mine when voting for this resolution will be that as the staff will be exploring, that we'll be able to move that charge into the CAP program if the customer becomes qualified for CAP at an appropriate point in time. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to move that flow restrictor charge within the CAP program, and that, in my view, it wouldn't be ideal, but it would be relatively affordable and not as significantly different or less advantageous than otherwise. So that's my view on it. So I'm prepared to support it.
Frank, anything? You're on mute. No. Okay. I have a couple of things. One is I do believe that this is the most humane approach that we can take given the constraints that we face under Prop 218. And so we'll happily support this. I think there's a couple things that I'm concerned about. One, and that I hope we'll bring forward in February, since we're not going to be out of this by then, that 7,000 number is very scary to me. And I'm sure it's scary to you too, Andrew. But I'm wondering if there is, it's good to hear that the number of CAP enrollments are doubling. I'm wondering if there's outreach that we can start doing to the 7,000 once we've adopted the resolution, or, at some point to sort of preview that we know, and we're hopeful that this horrible situation that we're in is over soon, and that for those of you that have been struggling, we're thinking about how you get out of this. And it sort of previews, the opportunity to sort of get ahead of the tsunami, right? So that it's not them waiting another, I'd like to hear more about what you think that sequencing is, because obviously people are already in that 60-day behind mark from right now, right? So we'd start that 30-day, 33-day or so clock ticking. So I'd just like to get ahead of that. And then in the, sort of forward days, maybe really start that first outreach call. I don't know if we have predictive dialing capacity, or if we could get a quick subscription to, Through Talk, or one of the many. I'm sure Doug could hook you up with some of the phone software that exists to be able to go through a lot of calls very quickly without them being robocalls. Just to sort of start getting the word out. I would caution too much messaging saying how much that the flow restrictor is really going to lower the water bill, because it's really not going to. Speaking as someone who doesn't use very much water now, my flow charges are like $7 a bill or something, or $8 a bill. I mean, it's the fixed charges and the sewer charge from the city of Oakland that dominate the bill for somebody who doesn't use very much water. So your bill's still going to be $135 every 2 months. It's not going to change. Instead of being 147 or whatever it is. So that I think that messaging. It would make sense if you were using 12 units or 15 units or something like that. And I think a lot of our delinquent customers that are in trouble are not using those copious amount. I consider copious amounts of water. So I'm glad we're doing this. I think full steam ahead. I don't think you need. Do we need a vote today? Or if we have consensus from the group, you're going to bring a resolution forward and we're going to vote in 2 weeks. Is that right?
That'll be correct. So it seems like I have feedback from the board, and we will come to you in 2 weeks with a resolution for your consideration. And of course, after that, we will start developing a plan. Part of the plan is that we will engage the community and also other research institutions to make sure things are done right. And we want to have a successful program going forward. We want to do this right. So we're going to reach out to folks to make sure that we get input when we need it. And then when it comes to February, during our next CAP workshop, I will bring to you a more detailed out plan and how we're going to execute it.
Okay.
Good job.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Now.
I don't have anything else. Thanks for the feedback.
Thank you, Andrew, for all the work that you're doing. We are next on to reports and director comments. For committee reports, the November 10th Planning Committee minutes were included in the agenda packet. We'll now get reports from the Finance Administration Committee and the November 23rd DERWA meeting, and I'll give a brief report on this morning's system capacity charge update workshop. Director Patterson, if you can give an update on the items that did not relate to the flow restrictor item, which you covered earlier. Bill, you're on mute. Still on mute. There you go.
Somebody muted me. I didn't know I was muted. Let me just say that the monthly investment transactions report were gone over early by staff. You approved those earlier on this agenda. We recommended them to you. And the other time that we spent really was on that collections end. And I wanted just to say, I'm proud of all of you who have voted to move us in this direction and all the cautions that you put on. You know, our people out there deserve all the help they can get in terms of the COVID situation being an overriding fact. And I think this board is very sensitive to the needs, and that's why we hold status in the eyes of our stakeholders, the people we represent. And I want to commend the board members, even those who were a little bit reluctant. We have to take a stand, and we have to get things done. And in the long term, it helps all of our people. You know, I'm for the least of us, but I'm also for education, for all the support that we can get to them for better understanding and changing their ways. And I do believe most people want to pay their bill. They don't want a bill hanging over. And when they can't get that help, we got friends like Frank, who goes out and gets agencies who have finance that can bring to the table to help the least of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Can Director Coleman or Director Mellon give a short DERWA update?
I'll do the DERWA update for you. We met last night, had a number of topics. We adopted the independent auditor's report. There was one minor, what I consider minor complaint from the auditor on how one item got billed or got put into 1 year as opposed to another year. But at the end of the report, everything was hunky-dory. More important part is that the JPA revision project is moving forward. Our staff is working well with the DSRSD staff, and not sure when we will have something, but we also got into a bit of a discussion about Pleasanton, as Pleasanton seems to suddenly become aware of the fact that maybe this DERWA project might be something they will not do just for a short term, but for a long term. The Contra Costa Sanitary District wastewater diversion project is about done, and that will help us this coming summer, next coming summer, because we just about ran out of water even this year. So with that project, we will, for the next 5 years, be able to be sure that we'll have water enough to deliver, recycled water enough to deliver. So that's the next meeting is scheduled for February 1st of 2021. And that's the DERWA report. Marguerite.
I was just trying to highlight my picture so I could see whether I was on mute or not. I'm going to report on the system capacity charge workshop that we held this morning. New customers to the district pay to join the district's facilities by putting forward their share of our kind of sunk infrastructure costs, as well as the increased demand that they put on the system. And we've set that up into, 3 zones in the service area, one covering most of the flat portions west of the hills, a section for the hill areas that run along the north-south portion of the district, and then a third zone for the sort of hotter portion of the district east of the hills. And every 10 years-ish, that gets evaluated. And so we've confronted a number of issues and challenges in this. Staff has to look at how our dramatically reduced system demand impacts those capacity charges, because there's sort of less call on our existing resources, less need for adding additional infrastructure resources. So we have a little bit more capacity. We've also looked at changes in water use by customer class and at the varying demand that multifamily dwellings put on the system, even at different sizes. And all of that has led to the likelihood that we will be reducing the system capacity, or SCC charges, by about 30% in the coming fiscal year. And that sort of highlights of that are that we have pilot project, or we've our accessory dwelling unit project actually results usually in no system capacity charges for adding accessory dwelling units to homes. We are further reducing SCC charges on apartments that are less than 500 square feet. We're doing a pilot program on tiny homes, and we are also looking at how to address system capacity charges for projects that offer community benefits, things like homeless shelters, community gardens, and other uses where the system capacity charge would basically, end them or not allow them to happen. And so looking at innovative ways to amortize the cost of those charges on those kinds of projects. And this will next be up on our March. We have it'll be incorporated into our rates workshop in March, which will be in the morning of, probably the morning of the second meeting in March. We'll do outreach in May of 2021 with the anticipation of adopting the new system capacity charges in June of 2021 for the beginning of July 1 FY22 fiscal year. So that is our big workshop this morning. And with that,
Marguerite, I had 2 more items that I forgot to mention on DERWA.
Okay.
First of all, with the project, re-examining the JPA and all that, there's a potential that Pleasanton may want to have a chat with all of us about being part of it. And what we raised was the issue of, well, it's nice of them to come along now. Where were they when we were first forming this? So we put out the concept that just like our system capacity charge, if Pleasanton wants to play, they're going to have to pay. And then secondarily, DSRSD just went through their first districts process. And of all the doggone things, they've worked into 5 districts. And Ed Duarte wound up finding himself doubled up with somebody. And so he thought it was a good time to retire yet again. But here's the sad part about this, because it was reported at the Alameda County Special Districts, they couldn't get anybody to run for the 5th district. So now they're trying to figure out how do they fill this spot. And it's a real conundrum for them, especially since they spent, was it John, like $235,000 or something like that. Excuse me, spelled wrong. So I thought, you know, we should be glad we have our district set up, but boy, it's costing people under this voting rights thing in California. And that's it. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Other items for future consideration, please submit those to the general manager. Other than wishing everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving or Native American Heritage Day or Family and Friends at a Distance Celebration Day, are there any other director comments?
None.
And I can't see anybody from the way I have my screen set up.
Bill has.
So just pipe up. Go ahead, Bill.
Gotta unmute yourself, Bill.
2 quick things. One, I just wanted to say to everybody, I hope you do have a blessed and good Thanksgiving Day. One of the things that happened for me is Dell has returned home, and I just wanted to share with you that she is much better.
Oh, good.
We're on hospice, and watch.
That's great news, Bill.
She's much better. No,
That's great.
I think despite being on hospice, she is much better. She came home almost skin and bones, and we brought her back. So I want to just say that's my blessing for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
All of you have a blessed Thanksgiving. That's really it.
Okay. We will then adjourn with our next regular meeting of the board to be held on our last meeting of 2020. Thank God 2020 is about to be over. December 8th at 1:15 p.m. And this meeting is now adjourned.